Okay, guys, I wanted you to do problem 5 because I don't know how much we really have talked about monopsonies. Well, I put a Khan Academy video link on your assignment page for this chapter. It talks a little bit about it, but I wanted to do this because you may get this on your AP exam, and I want to make sure you're familiar with the term and what it actually is, a monopsony. A monopsony is basically when a firm has enough market power to actually control the wages. So they're going to be able to hire the quantity of labor that they want and pay them what they want. Now, a situation would be what they're describing here is Woodland is a small town in which everybody in the town only has one employment choice. It's a lot like when you think of Walmart. Walmart can come into a small town and almost be a monopsony because so many folks in the town don't have any better option than to work at Walmart. So this is sort of what this is. But this is sort of the perfect, sort of the theoretical example where everyone works for this company, and Tremart is a monopsonist in the labor market and a perfect competitor in the lumber market. So they're, in terms of what selling lumber, they're in a perfectly competitive market, but in terms of hiring labor, they're a monopsonist. They can control, they can decide how much labor they want to hire and what they want to pay. So in the short run, there's only one variable input, and that's labor. So this is all theoretical, but this is, what you need. We're making a lot of assumptions here to sort of simplify the problem. And this is the graph of this monopsis. Now, if we look at this, we can see, okay, if we compare it to, let's say, if we compare this to your typical monopoly or monopolistically competitive graph, we can see that we have a demand curve and we have a marginal revenue curve that's lower. And we're going to produce at a quantity where the marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, if we compare that to the monopsonist, we can see that we have a marginal factor cost curve that's above the supply curve, not below, but above. So it's kind of the opposite. So you've got a supply and you've got a marginal factor cost above that. So this is your supply of labor. This is the curve that depicts the town's supply of labor. But because everybody has to work for the company, we can draw the actual marginal factor cost of labor up here above it. And we're going to choose a point where marginal factor cost equals labor demand, which is your marginal revenue product of labor is also your, and I should probably say that, so let me just type that in, equals labor, whoa, not what I wanted to do, equals labor, I'm trying to scoot that over, equals labor demand, right? So that's what that is. Okay, so we've got that going on. Okay, so we're going to produce at this point, right? And however, instead of moving up to our price, we're going to move down to our wage rate. So we're going to produce it where marginal factor cost equals marginal revenue product or labor demand, which is at 100, and we're going to pay a wage. Instead of going up to the demand curve as we would do over here, right? We're going down to the labor supply curve to find that point where we're going to find our wage, the wage that this company is going to pay. So that's what happens theoretically in a town where everybody has to work for the same company. The company has control over quantity and wage. Okay, so now what? Now it's asking us, so we've done A, we've done B, so this is 110. And C is identify the quantity of labor hired in each of the following situations. Okay, Tremart operates in a competitive labor market. Well, let's think about that. If it was competitive, then they would operate where the supply equals demand, right? Where supply equals demand. So they would operate right here. So they would pay, the quantity of labor would be 200. And I'm not sure they're asking for the wage. Let's see if they're asking for the wage. So identify the wage rate. Identify the quantity of labor. No, just the quantity, right? So, but we can also see that the wage would be 15. So we'd actually be here. If this was a perfectly competitive labor market, we'd end up right here, where supply equals demand. Now, what happens if now the confusing thing about this is they're not comparing part 2 with part 1 here. They're comparing part 2 with the monopsony situation, right? So if the government imposes a minimum wage onto this monopsonist of $12.50 an hour. So let's pull this back out and let's go back to where they are as a monopsonist. So as a monopsonist, they're here, right? And it's asking what happens if the government imposes, actually, no, I'm sorry, they're here, right? In terms of wage, right? This is where the monopsonist is going to be, because they're going to find this point where marginal factor cost equals marginal revenue product. Then they're going to move down to where that intersects with the supply of labor curve. So in the monopsonist situation, this company is going to be paying $10 an hour. So if the government imposes a $12.50 pay minimum wage, they're going to have to go up. So then we move up to here. And we're going to find the quantity produced is going to be where that price intersects with the supply of labor, which is right here. So our quantity produced with a minimum wage of $12.50 is going to be 100 well, not quantity produced, I'm sorry, quantity of labor hired. Quantity of labor hired is going to move up from 100 to 150 at that higher wage of $12 an hour. And there's one more thing I think they want you to say, explain, right? Explain why that is. Well, the explanation is that when you have a minimum wage of $12.50, then the marginal factor cost is it no longer this downward sloping curve right here. The marginal factor cost with this set wage is just this horizontal line here at $12.50 up to the point where it intersects with the supply of labor, right? Because if you wanted more labor, you would have to pay more, right? You'd have to pay more, but you're going to get 150 units of labor, 150 workers, I guess, if you are paying $12.50 an hour. If you only pay 10, you're going to get 100. And I just want to say that this isn't really part of the chapter or even your test, but it's important. When you think about labor economics and you really get into it, it's very fascinating, because you start thinking about, what is the minimum that it would take for somebody to go out into the workforce. So in this theoretical situation right here, if we're only paying $10 an hour, we can only find 100 people in the town who are willing to work. That's it, right? If the government comes in and says, no, you have to pay $12.50, then if we're going by our data on this graph, we can see that 50 workers decide, well, if I'm going to get $12 and a half, it's worth me getting up every morning and going to work for this company. And it kind of begs the question, well, why? How could you possibly choose not to work when you have to work? How do you live? Well, there's several things you can think about there. One would be if it's a mother who has children, her child care may be more expensive than what she could earn making $10 an hour. And if her wage goes up to $12 and a half an hour, that may be enough more than what her child care expenses would be to entice her to make her to cause her to make the rational decision to I'm better off working than not working. And then you can also think about things like welfare, food stamps, government assistance. For example, for a long time, Walmart paid such low wages that the typical Walmart store, with however many employees they had, was subsidized by the federal government by about $250,000 a year. In other words, the government benefits that the Walmart employees qualified for, like food stamps and other benefits, because their wages were so low, cost the U.S. taxpayers $250,000 per Walmart store. So, as wages go up, more and more people make the decision to go into the workforce. Okay, that about does it for problem number 5.